Hello, and welcome to The More You NoCo, a podcast about the people and ideas of Northern Colorado. I'm your host, Ivan Wayne. Let's go! Today on the show, we feature Lisa Taylor, the Executive Director of the Immigrant and Refugee Center located in East Greeley. I was very lucky to be able to sit down in Lisa's office and hear all about the wonderful things they're doing at the IRC. Lisa Taylor and her staff are working very hard night and day to work with immigrants and refugees in Weld County. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. All right, welcome. Here I sit in the office of Lisa Taylor, the Executive Director of the Immigrant and Refugee Center of Northern Colorado, located out here in Eastern Greeley. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So let's just start it off. What is the IRC?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the Immigrant and Refugee Center in Northern Colorado is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our main purpose is, of course, to serve immigrants and refugees and empower them and assist them in healthy integration into the broader Weld County, Colorado, American culture and community. That looks like kind of how that plays out is really different. We focus a lot on the educational aspect because language acquisition is so important for healthy integration. But even beyond the ESL classes and the citizenship preparation classes and the high school equivalency exam preparation classes, beyond all that educational aspect, we really just want to provide community navigation services as well. So I don't know if you've had to apply for insurance or a job lately, it's become quite complicated. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. And even if you're a native English speaker and well-versed in American culture, it's a lot of bureaucratic red tape everywhere you go. So we want to just be a hub to provide assistance and services to help our students, who are all adults, navigate that so that they can feel content and like they're building a sustainable life. So the education aspect, the community navigation aspect, and then also we do a lot of advocacy work. So what we want is, obviously we want to do that empowerment work within the immigrant and refugee community, but we also want to kind of build a bridge that's a two-way street, if you will, between our students, our clients, and the Weld County, the community members, who, some of whom are very aware of the presence of immigrants and refugees, and some who never really interact with this part of the community. So we really want to advocate for just building, as hokey as this sounds, for building a more unified, inclusive community. Right. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what happens here. Yeah.
That advocacy piece you mentioned, educating people in the community, linking your students with your partners. What successes have you had with that? I mean, I feel like that's such a nebulous task. Where do you even start?
So I'll say just a couple of different tasks that we do, and then the outcomes are as varied as the students we serve. I worked in education for years before I stumbled into the nonprofit world, and it feels like to me, when I worked in other facets of education, that I could see outcomes and there were gains and checked boxes, and working with adult learners, and then specifically working with immigrants and refugees, those sort of measurable gains are a little bit harder to detect. And so the successes vary all the way from, hey, this student can read their mail now, to the student can go, this parent can engage in parent-teacher conferences. So it's really all across the board as far as what those successes look like. The advocacy part comes in where we provide Refugee 101 and Immigration 101 classes to Rotary clubs and churches and community or other community organizations. We go to a lot of staff meetings of agencies and organizations and even corporations and talk about what we do and who we serve and kind of some of the cultural norms and variations that they might see if they're interacting with the immigrant and refugee community. So the advocacy happens with that sharing information piece to the community, but also in providing events. Like we invite, we have events that we invite both those we're serving and those we hope to introduce to those we're serving to come together for multicultural festivals, food festivals, simulation activities. And so the advocacy work kind of happens on a number of different levels, anywhere from meeting one-on-one with potential donors to to broader events where we're inviting hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
It's hard to say to what extent we've been successful at that, because just to be really honest, in our current political climate, it's become increasingly more difficult to kind of navigate what does immigration reform look like, what does a healthy community need, and diversity is a part of that, and kind of how do we sell that ideology and get buy-in on that, and it's just become a little bit difficult to navigate in this particular political landscape. So in terms of measuring success, I wish there was I wish I had the energy and the time and the resources to really evaluate public opinion, to say to Weld County, to do a survey and say, to what extent do you believe the presence of immigrants and refugees adds value to this community? And then to do a year later, after a number of advocacy efforts and events, to reassess everyone and see, have we moved the needle at all on helping people understand that a more inclusive community is best for all of us?
Right. I was sitting here thinking, how would you begin to reach out to individuals in the community who possibly have a negative view of immigrants and refugees, or they don't. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I was sitting here thinking, you do advocacy with groups and you do invites and you come give talks, but what about people who aren't in those avenues? I mean, that just seems like
it's hard to. I mean, you're exactly right, because those people aren't. If they're coming to an event, they are either neutral or an ally. We're not attracting people who have an aversion or some fear or misinformation, or any inherent bias, So it is difficult to know, how do we reach out to them? How do we build that bridge? And again, I feel like this is sort of cheesy, anecdotal way to explain it. But honestly, I think the most effective thing that we can do with those particular individuals is, once we start and open a dialogue with them and really take a posture of listening to understand why maybe they have a bent against immigrants or refugees, or why maybe they don't care at all about immigrants or refugees, to really figure out where they're coming from and what experiences, if any, they've had that have shaped that, or if it's been influenced by the media. And then once we kind of understand where they're coming from, then we can have those honest conversations of addressing any misnomers or myths. And then and this is the part I think that, it does sound really kind of cheesy to say it this way, but I think it's pretty difficult to have ill will and to practice discrimination when you've actually met and interacted with the people that you've historically had hatred or an aversion to. And so anytime we can, after that initial dialogue, get some of those folks in the same room or across the table at the coffee shop from one of our immigrants and refugees, and let them have a chance to get to know each other, I think that's the most, effective, long-lasting way to build those bridges and change minds and, create more harmonies. When you put like a face and skin and a voice to those stories or those facts or those statistics, it really is a game changer. But I mean, what do you think about immigrants and refugees?
And a name too.
Yeah, and a name, for sure.
Yeah, no, I love it. When I found out that Greeley was one of the top immigrant and refugee, what would you call it? Resettlement areas in the country, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. I think it's neat. And one of my thoughts here when I was listening is, have you noticed anyone saying anything? You mentioned political climate, and I wonder, since 2016, has there been any new challenges that have popped up for you all here at the IRC? Or is it more of kind of like a subtle mood that maybe the conversation is more, it's critical and it's more timely now?
Yeah, well, it definitely is more critical and timely, and there's really some exceedingly positive things that have happened since 2016. Those positive things were, by and large, a reaction to some really horrific things that were occurring and unfolding. And so things have changed and had impact on us in a number of ways. The first of which is, most obviously, a number of our immigrants and refugees have felt increased fear and trepidation about whether they're going to be able to stay in this country and what does that mean for them. And does this country no longer want them here? We have a lot of the clients we serve still have family members in countries in Africa. We have a lot of Burmese families that we serve here that still have family members in Burma. And then the bulk of our immigrant population are from Mexico, and they still have a number of family members who are still in Mexico going through the application process to immigrate here. And so a lot of our clients feel like now reuniting with their family has either become not a possibility any longer because of travel bans or because of decreased numbers in refugees we're accepting and because of immigration reform, or even if it's still a possibility, now it's a much longer wait time. And so there's been hope has diminished significantly as far as what family reunification may look like. There's also been financial implications for us because obviously as all of these things shift and change, federal dollars and state dollars, like grant money that's out there, there's shifts in all of that. And to be fair, there's shifts in the funding streams no matter what administration it is. That's kind of all, yeah, exactly. That's just the nature of the beast with politics and grants. But it has been the case that a number of people doing this kind of work have felt a tightening of the budget and some fear around, okay, what's going to happen? Will we even have any support to do this work moving forward? So, and then the last thing, and I don't want to be overly political because I don't know who's listening to this podcast. I don't know who your listenership will be, and I don't want any.
Neither do I, because as of right now, it's 0.
Okay, great. So I'll
this
just
is a free mic.
All right. Well, I don't want to say anything that would in any way alienate someone or be offensive or insulting to any of your listeners, regardless of their own political affiliation. But I will say that one of the more devastating consequences that we've sort of seen play out since 2016 is that people have become, at least in circles in which I'm dealing and working and reaching out to, people have become more verbally explicit in their disdain for immigrants and refugees. And perhaps those feelings and that thinking and that stance was there before, but they just remained quiet. But there's been a sort of outpouring of hate speech and of just a more aggressive get out, we don't want you here. And that's been really that kind of just mean-spirited talk and hate speech really has devastating effects on our clients for sure. But I want to say the sort of, when I mentioned the really positive things that have occurred, is that kind of in the wake of more people being verbal about their disdain, lots of people who were allies and are supportive and really want to welcome immigrants and refugees who were maybe not as verbal about their support have become more verbal too. So I think there's been a sort of igniting of passion for people who were already allies to our cause and to a number of people who were kind of in the middle that have really stepped up and said, hey, how can I get involved in this work? I don't want to see anyone, isolated from their family. I don't want to see anyone hurting. I do think we as a country have a responsibility to be good stewards over our own systems, and that includes inviting people into that. And so it's been kind of encouraging to see the increase in involvement and awareness about these issues. And I don't think that would have happened, unfortunately, if things hadn't gotten dark first.
Right. No. So there's a lot there I'd like to walk through. First, let's cover this empathetic scenario for possible listeners out there. I moved from Dallas, Texas to Greeley, Colorado. And there was a feeling there that I knew not a single person in this entire town and not a single person in this entire state. But you know what I could do? I knew the lay of the land. I knew the language. Mm-hmm. I knew the informal bureaucracy to getting a job, to applying to this, and working my way through society structure. I moved from Texas to Colorado. It's different in many ways, but the undertones of society are pretty similar. So extrapolate that. You
Yeah.
move to a country and it's a state you maybe have never heard of. It's a town you may never have heard of. And you walk around and maybe not that often. You don't see people who look like you, who speak the same language as you. You don't necessarily know the language that is written on everything.
Yeah.
And people just expect or think that, life would be easy from that point. And so, the political debate about completely open borders, semi, whatever, we can get into that if we want. I feel like that's a different conversation. But what I loved about the IRC and why I wanted to talk with you today is just, I think it is an awesome thing that you all are doing to help people be here. We want you here, and not only that, we want you to thrive. We want you to succeed. Everybody in some format knows what it's like to be brand new somewhere.
Yes.
But I don't think many people in the United States know what it's like to be somewhere and be almost totally alone.
Yeah.
Verbally and aesthetically and culturally.
For sure. Yeah, it's so, what an isolated feeling for sure. And I know, like you said, all of us can relate to the anxiety that comes with a brand new experience. Anybody, probably everybody who will listen to this at some point, they can think of a first day of school at a new school or a first day at a new job. Like the anxiety that comes with, I don't know anybody, that alone can make you feel so lonely and so intimidated. And as you said, and these are situations in which you do know the language and the culture, and you have confidence that at some point you will build meaningful friendships and such. I was thinking as you were talking, I was reminded of some of my travels abroad, and I speak no other languages, just enough Spanish to tell any of my students to wait until tomorrow when my Spanish staff are here. And so everywhere I've traveled, looking at street signs, like all the things you take for granted, looking at a menu, it's so disorienting. And I remember in particular, just this past summer, having to ask questions and trying to understand in Germany, trying to understand where I was supposed to go next. And I remember walking away thinking, that guy probably thinks I'm a total idiot. Like, he has no idea that I'm actually this really capable, smart lady, at least mildly intelligent, But I remember feeling dumb because I thought he thinks I'm dumb. And that was such a moment for me to be empathetic, and just my heart broke for our students, because I think one of the things that they deal with is other people's perception of them, and thinking that a lack of ability to speak this language or navigate in this country, that means there's a lack of intelligence. And we have immigrants and refugees who are smart and have amazing skill sets and can do things that I never dreamed of doing, but because they're not able to articulate that just yet, there's this assumption that somehow they're deficient. And I think that can create a lot of barriers and loneliness for our clients as well. The Colorado Refugee Service Program, service providers, they did a longitudinal study that looked at what would healthy integration look like? Like, what does that entail for someone new, start to finish, to come in and then to be what we would call, healthily integrated. So they're retaining their own sense of identity and culture with some autonomy, but also they're fitting in, so to speak, insofar as they're not just surviving, but they're thriving in the community in which they live. And they identified, language acquisition as being a core component, job attainment as being a core component, because the job attainment obviously gets to financial sustainability and feeling a sense of self and pride. And then the other one was social bridging. And I thought that was so interesting, but probably all the sociologists and psychologists in the world would have already told me this, but it was really interesting just to know that in as much as it's important for them to learn the language and to attain a job and become financially independent, it's equally as important for healthy integration for them to feel like they're building meaningful relationships in the community outside of their own, family or culture. And so those three things that's lofty, trying to go somewhere and think, I've got to learn the language, get a job, and build relationships.
Make friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how would you make friends? I mean, let's be honest. A lot of people in the United States are unilingual. They know English.
Yes.
They know one language. It's such a daunting reality to me to think about making new friendships when you don't necessarily speak the language that most people around you speak. That's intimidating, because family's great, right? But come on. Yeah. Family is not the be-all, end-all. We need some people to hang out with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I think...
So I think you're right. It is daunting, to be sure. I think just once we get to meet people, then just practicing English together. Of course, that happens in the classroom, but if we can do that in a context of shared interest, I think that's a great sort of fertile ground to build those meaningful relationships. So in sticking with the fertile ground analogy, I'll say, like UNC, for example, has a community garden. And so a couple of our teachers and one of our navigators with a few of our students, purchased, or however that works, lease, they have a portion of that community garden. And so that's an activity that's a shared common interest that they could do together. And then they can practice those English skills and get to know each other, in that context. And then that gives then you're building rapport and trust. And so then eventually language skills are attained, maybe on both ends. And then that language barrier becomes less and less significant. But it's amazing how much trust and rapport can be built even between two people who don't speak the same language, just by shared interest. Oh, your child goes to this school, my child goes to the school. Oh, your little boy's on the soccer team, the same soccer team as my little boy. Those are great opportunities to just start that relationship building process. And again, as cheesy and as sophomoric as it sounds, then you start to discover there's tons of common ground. I mean, right. Cultures are so different, and ethnicity and race and languages spoken, and then cultural values. There's all these variations, but then there's those rudimentary things of, I want to feel loved and valued. I want the best for my children. I'd like to move up in my job. There's these core things at the heart of all of us, and sort of having common interest gives you a chance to unpack that a little bit with the other person.
Right. Or I just want to have fun on the weekend.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do or where to go, so take me along.
One of our navigators, I didn't find this out until he had been working for us for 4 months, and something came up about, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Da, da, da. And I found out, his name's Mian, and he loves karaoke. I did not see that one coming, and I'm terrible at karaoke, but it's so fun. And so we were telling him well, here's where you can go for karaoke. And this one's a bar. And so, if you're uncomfortable being around alcohol, this is you're going to have a hard time finding karaoke here in Weld County, And so kind of helping navigate those pieces of it, that's really fun and enjoyable too. And then
Joe recommend the Jaeger.
I said the Jaeger, and then one of my teachers at that time said there was a place off of 23rd Ave, and then she said it's kind of shady, and then we had to explain the word shady because he only knows shady in the context of literal shade from the tree. Yeah. So then we talked about sketchy, shady, a dive. And so then it opened up all this other vernacular and colloquial speech to talk about that. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for just how can we have fun together. And then that takes a lot of the pressure off on the language stuff, and you can let it kind of happen organically instead of let's get together and talk about past tense verbs, Yeah. No one wants to do that on the weekend. I mean, I might. I'm kind of a nerd. Truly.
Some people do, but maybe not everyone. Yeah. Not only are you in a new land, learning a new language, but the language in the area that you happen to speak of is arguably the most complex on the planet, with the utmost amount of slang.
Absolutely.
Just dive bar. What is that? Are we going swimming?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Shady. Is it outside? It's sketchy. What do you mean? Like there's so much slang.
Absolutely.
In
Well,
the
and
English language.
even if we took slang out of the picture, what if we said no idioms, no slang, and we just focus on the English language in its most, truest, straightforward sense? Even within that, it's a nuanced language that's exceedingly difficult to learn. And there's formal and informal, even in that context. Like, even before we get to slang, there's still like tone and inferences. And so I think I had a job job application from someone from Somalia, and this person is highly qualified to do the job. But in their cover letter, they didn't understand the level of formal speech that a cover letter necessitates. And so we used it as a learning experience and talked about, like, this is kind of high stakes. And so we want to use the most elevated language we can, the most formal speech that we can. And those are things that, like, just learning the language alone is so hard. And then you add 6 billion other nuances and facets to that. And it's overwhelming. Do you speak any other languages?
I don't. I had a decent handle on Spanish when I taught middle school in Dallas, and then I didn't use it anymore and I lost it. And I'm very sad about that.
Yeah.
I keep telling myself I need to download Duolingo. I need to get back to it. I know I'd pick it right back up. I just haven't. And there's no excuse. So,
well, it's language acquisition. It's hard. It's kind of, you got to gear yourself up for it. And it is a sort of use it or lose it, like stay engaged with that language all the time.
Right. Yeah. And, I had took formal Spanish in high school, but nothing in college. And then you end up in a parent meeting with someone who doesn't necessarily speak English. It's a majority Spanish conversation. You start to learn Spanish really fast.
Yeah.
Because it's a necessity. You need it. And man, I learned pretty fast there. And it was kind of neat because I was teaching math, and I was teaching 12-year-old 7th graders math, and they were teaching me Spanish.
Oh.
So it's a nice reciprocal kind of situation there.
Yeah. I just want to say I can't imagine teaching math and then also to 7th graders.
Mm-hmm.
They're a really bizarre little group of human beings, God bless them. And then doing that with multiple languages is like, that must have been an incredibly difficult / enriching experience for you.
Yeah, it was all the above and 10 more adjectives. I will say one thing I was not ready for that surprised me was this feeling that I was in a parent meeting. This was right at the beginning of the year, and I was just starting to try to get a handle on the Spanish again. And I believe she was a kindergartner or a 1st grader, served as the translator between me and their parent for an older sibling who was a 7th grader. But, that was just, it was one of my first immersions into, like, how could we be helping these families? Yeah,
because on the one hand, you're thinking, like, I just automatically think, like, oh my gosh, I admire that 1st grader so much. Like, look at them go, and they're accomplishing this really important thing. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, they're a 1st grader. There's no way they should have to be the one bearing the burden. Exactly, like carrying a weight like that of having to interpret. And we see that a lot with our clients here. Their children sometimes have just had more of an educational background in general, which helps them acquire the language more quickly. And then also they're in school all day long, as opposed to our clients who attend a couple hours a day as opposed to all day. Mm-hmm. So their kiddos are getting a much more immersion experience, which makes, which expedites the process of language acquisition. But we see them having to serve as translators for their parents at doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences. And, courts will provide interpretation, but it really, those kids have to grow up a lot faster than what's ideal because, they're acclimating to a new culture, and they're also kind of have become part caretaker for their family too because of their ability to speak English. So I don't know how we're ever going to get away from that entirely, but I do believe part of the empowerment piece that happens here at the center is that it is a milestone moment when our clients get to the point that they no longer need their children to serve as interpreters anymore. Like that's a pretty significant threshold to cross.
Right. Yeah. And just so many ways to go. The one that pops back in my mind. You had originally asked me how I felt about immigrants and refugees. So there's like a 3-day or 3-week conversation to be had based on what I'm about to say. But in my opinion, the idea that we can move from state to state. I moved from Texas to Colorado. Nobody met me out there on I-70 by the Welcome to Colorful Colorado sign and asked me, why am I moving to Colorado? I need to prove that I'm a Texan.
Right.
Which I was not a Texan. I lived there for 2 years. I am not a Texan.
Your accent's not as thick as mine.
Where are you from?
Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Yes.
See, I saw a thing about Tennessee. I didn't know if that was said.
Oh yeah, my best friend lives in Tennessee, so the "I love all y'all" was from her.
Okay, so where are you from in Arkansas?
I grew up in Central Arkansas. All my family's in the northwest corner.
Okay, what town?
Bentonville.
Bentonville, yeah, I'm from Tulsa.
Oh, so you know. Tulsa's
Yeah.
the closest airport to Bentonville.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, I'm real familiar with the Tulsa International Airport.
Yeah.
Best friends.
I thought that was a regular airport until I flew out of Denver.
Yeah.
Or DFW, for that
Yeah,
matter. That place is a
exactly.
city by itself.
Yeah.
Wow, Arkansas. Okay, well, we might circle back on that.
Okay.
But,
So you didn't have to prove anything to anybody when you came here.
yeah, and I just, I don't get the fear that surrounds it. People are moving here for hundreds of reasons. Their country may be great and they just want a different life in the United States, or they could be coming from a war-torn country where they've lost half of their family members. Who are we to say that they shouldn't be here? I don't get that sentiment. And I think a lot of times it's just a lack of understanding and a lack of empathy. A lot of people have not had to even imagine a lifestyle like that where you would want to move somewhere so badly.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think this job has taught me a lot about empathy. Not just empathy for the immigrants and refugees I serve, but also it's sort of forced me to try to be more understanding of why are people afraid, instead of feeling, having this visceral, like, stop being a racist, xenophobic person, like instead of just having my own reaction to their lack of acceptance and tolerance and all of that, to really try to say, okay, why are you afraid? What's your resistance to the presence of immigrants and refugees in this community? And what I've learned is that, honestly, there's just some crummy people out there. Like, there are some people that they just got a heart full of hate, for no good reason. But there's also this significant group of people who have been misinformed. And I've heard from a number of people that had said, no, I really don't want immigrants and refugees in this community. And when we get to the heart of why, they expressed concerns like, well, I'm really afraid they're going to be a drain on our economy. And then we're going to have raised taxes, and I'm doing my best just to get by. I can't afford to support people who can't support themselves. And really, they weren't saying it from like this, inherently destructive, selfish nature. It was like legitimate concern of economic impact on their own life and on their own family. And so I love it when it's reasons like that, because then I can say, hey, actually, there's been this report done on the economic impact of immigrants and refugees on a community. And can we talk about how much income they generate, how many revenue streams they feed into, because they are paying taxes, they are this and that. Let's talk about the job gap that they feel. So it gives me a chance to have a conversation, to speak truth to that darkness and say, hey, if that's your concern, we can really alleviate that by just getting the right information. And so those are conversations that have been awesome. Sometimes people will say, because I'm like you, Ivan, I don't understand why somebody wouldn't just say, hey, diversity is great. Let's all work together. Let's be a team,
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome. Who am I, as you said, who am I to say you can't be here kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then other times, people will say, well, I'm afraid they're going to take jobs away from, American citizens, and that's not right. And so then that's another conversation we can have where we look at the employment trends, and we can see that, there's places like JBS that employ a number of immigrants and refugees. And just to be quite blunt, there's not a lot of, native-born American citizens graduating high school and wanting to work on the kill floor at JBS.
Right.
So it's really not the case that immigrants and refugees are taking jobs and natural-born American citizens aren't allowed to get jobs, or that we're seeing unemployment in American citizens because of the presence of immigrants and refugees. That's just blatantly untrue. So it's easier to kind of move that needle and change that bias when they can point to their reason why they're afraid. What the tricky part is just when they just seem like kind of a bad guy, or, kind of they're just not a nice lady, that's a little bit harder to change.
Right. And that supersedes this topic or conversation. That's in all things. Yeah. There are some arguably bad apples out there who are going to be sour no matter what.
Yeah.
In any format, in any scenario.
It's true.
And it makes me think to a much lesser degree, some of these same worries could be said from native Coloradans to the increasing number of transplants.
Yes, of which we are both.
Yes, right. You are my 12th interview, and unless my memory serves me incorrectly, I think I've only interviewed one native Coloradan, maybe two.
Yeah.
And that is stunning.
Yeah.
I
think the state, though, it sucks you in.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some sort of magical power.
Yeah.
And you think, I love Colorado. I got to live here.
Right. How'd you end up here?
Well, I've been back and forth. I sort of have dual citizenship, I think, between Arkansas and Colorado. Most recently, I've moved back here. I actually did my graduate work at the University of Northern Colorado.
Oh, nice.
And but I had lived in Colorado right after college. Undergrad, I lived out here for a few years. I had been out here skiing, growing up and then through college. And I thought, when I finish, I'm going to be, I can get my Arkansas teaching license changed to a Colorado teaching license. And I think I'd like to live in Colorado because I love it so much. And having only ever been to Winter Park and Vail and Aspen, I arbitrarily ended up in Greeley, Colorado, where there are 0 ski slopes and the mountains are distant view. And I don't, stink and all. I just really loved this community, and I got involved with some of the work here, and I loved my teaching experience, and I did my grad work at UNC, and the city of Greeley has done that Greeley Unexpected campaign for a while now, but it really is the case. I just feel like we're a great kept secret in this community. It's diverse, and you're close enough to get to the mountains and enjoy all the magnificent beauty that Colorado has, but we don't have to pay prices for bread that you do in mountain towns. So I love it here. Yeah. Did you come out here for your academic pursuit, or? I
did not. No, I was tired of the concrete jungle.
Okay.
And tired of flatlands. Growing up in Oklahoma, moving down to Texas. Yeah. And my first exposure to Colorado was a trip out here. One of my great friends went to the Air Force Academy, and he invited me out for a camping trip outside of Pikes Peak in the Springs. People have heard this story before on the podcast, but I stepped out at a gas station. I always remember this. It was the first time I had seen the Rocky Mountains with my own eyes at the age of, I want to say 23, something like that.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to move here. And I did 3 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. So
it really was love at first sight with the Rockies, huh?
Yeah, it's just, I'm a mountain person. I will be here.
Yeah.
And I was. I decided I was not going to return to the middle school I was working at for that year and moved to Greeley. I ended up getting my master's at UNC, but the person I was with at the time, we moved out here, they worked for UNC's housing. So that's how I ended up in Greeley. The only thing I knew about Greeley before we moved here was stuff from South Park, the opposite of Hawaii.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Stuff like that, which WeldWorks has owned with a beer flavor. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Like, people don't know this, but places like WeldWorks, that number one, like we have this amazing brewery who's winning all these awards.
Nationally
Yes,
renowned,
they're
yeah.
just crushing it in the craft beer industry, and they're right up the road from us.
Mm-hmm.
So how lucky are we? And then I'll just say, because I adore WeldWorks, that they are also so community oriented. Like, it's been my experience that lots of breweries, lots of people in the craft beer industry just tend to be great people and community minded. I don't know if I've just been overly exposed to the good side of things, but WeldWorks in particular, they've given back to this community. You know, they're really trying to sort of build a better life and raise the bar for all of us here in the Greeley community. And it's like, man, that's the kind of, like, that's the place I want to be a part of. Like, this is a city I want to be part of, where businesses and corporations who are just doing a great job and are in it to make money, but have also said, no, but we're also in it to do what we can and give back to the community. It's awesome. And they're not alone in that work, for sure.
Yeah. Without a 5-paragraph essay, I don't know that I could eloquently say anything more than Greeley's always had a vibe that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, from the first year I lived here. That's just the way I always felt. It is such an interesting, strange mix of, you got college students, which
Yes.
only make up about 10% of the town. Then you got agricultural work. You got immigrants and refugees. You have native Coloradans who just happen to be in the Greeley-Evans area.
Yeah.
And it's just such a neat melting pot.
It
And,
really is. Yeah. I said there's lots of things I miss about the South, in particular my family, who all still live there. I guess that's the primary thing I miss. But there's other little things I miss, like the more pronounced changing of the seasons that you get in the South. But in Colorado, specifically in Greeley, you know, I get to drink beer with the same people I go to church with. And you don't get to do that much in the South, you know. And then, like, you know, and so, and I get to go to church with people from all different walks of life. And then if I want to go visit the mosque, there's a couple of options there for that too. And I get to know older people who have been in Weld County for generation after generation after generation, and I get to tap into their wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And then there's the presence of the university. So if I want to go see Flatland and walk the Pooter Trail, I can, or if I want to go see a decent performance, we've got UNC and community theater here that do a great job. And so it's a little like, one of my friends who's from Chicago, she said that she loves Denver because it's a little starter city and she just thinks it's the cutest. And to me, Denver is still kind of the big city.
Yeah.
But I think about Greeley, like, it's this, like, it's just enough of sort of big city options, you know, you can eat wherever you want. But then you're still going to run into somebody you know at the grocery store. I feel like it's sort of best of all the worlds.
I agree. I enjoy Greeley's size.
I feel like we're making this a commercial for Greeley. Someone should give us a kickback.
Oh, those will come. Those will come later on. Those are down the road. And a criticism of Greeley, further from the mountains. It's like, what, hour 20 to Estes, hour to Denver, 2-ish, 2.5 to Colorado Springs, 1 to 2 hours to all the ski resorts. Okay.
Yeah.
How far is that drive if you live in Tennessee? How far is that drive to Estes Park if you live in Montana?
That's right.
Like, if you're comparing it to people right on the foothills, sure. But, I mean, if you told me that a third, let's say a fifth of the vacation destinations in the United States would be within a day's drive of me.
Heck yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I've never, maybe, I mean, obviously I'm very biased for G-Town here, but I've never got the disdain for Greeley. So.
Yeah, me either. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. In thinking about your experience and the first time you saw the Rocky Mountains, we took a group of our staff members, one of whom speaks 6 languages, and he's our Rohingya interpreter. And when we took that group to Estes Park and just, you know, spend the day, went into Rocky Mountain National Park, I'm telling you what, I didn't think I was ever going to get them home. They must have taken thousands of pictures. Like, it was so, like, and it really, like, hit me again, like, stop taking this for granted. Like, this is absolutely beautiful. But truly it was the case. Like, every time we turned a corner, every trail we went down, just photograph after photograph after photograph they wanted to take. They were overwhelmed with the beauty. So it was kind of cool to get to re-experience the awe that I experienced when I initially came to Colorado and saw those mountains. And then we ate at some some Mexican restaurant in town, and they had sombreros, and they also thought that was the funniest thing. There was a birthday party, and so the person was having to wear the sombrero and sing, and they also thought, my staff thought that was the most hilarious thing ever. So then we got to have this fun conversation about absurdities of our cultural practices with birthdays and all of that stuff here. But it was such a great day, and it reminded me once again, like, how fortunate I am to live in this great state.
Yeah. On the website, I noticed that you all do exercise, or that you educate about exercise opportunities. Do you do a lot of hiking trips or things up to Estes Park?
We don't do lots of that. I wish we did. So we have like kind of offshoots, I guess, like trips like that to go see places outside of Weld County. So that happens quite a bit. But then there's also just like go to the Pooter Trail, and right. There's more just immediate stuff. We've really tried to focus this last year, and even more so in this last school year, and then we're going to even more so in this school year, focus on the health component, and not just physical health, but like mental, emotional, behavioral health, because we know we can't be all things to all people, but we've really worked on building great relationships with like Sunrise and North Range, in making sure like students can feel whole and well so that they can, live their best life, because it's kind of hard to concentrate on learning a language if like you've got an abscess tooth, but you've never been to the dentist before, kind of thing. So the outdoor activities and the, just, gardening and stuff like that is kind of an effort of, let's make sure we're being holistic in helping people integrate. You
mentioned Sunrise Community Health.
Yeah, love them.
Yeah, I gotta be frank. The reason I'm here is because of someone you met 2 weeks ago.
Oh, who's that?
Dr. Holly Haverman.
Oh,
is
okay.
my girlfriend.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, she's lovely, by the way.
And that night she said, she knows I'm doing the podcast and getting started, and she said, I have someone that you have to interview. So I looked up the IRC. I had heard about it, but I wasn't familiar. So,
how fortuitous that Holly came. Well, she was wonderful, and I'm such a big fan of Sunrise. Again, it may be the same as the craft beer industry, where I've just been overexposed to all the exact right, great people. But I kid you not, every physician and administrator I have met from Sunrise has just had such an amazing, beautiful heart to serve this community well, regardless of any, any race, any age, any socioeconomic status. Like, those are all non-factors. They just want to serve this community well. And I can't say enough good things about them, and how fortunate I feel to be able to partner with them.
Yeah. They have these annual events around Valentine's Day, and they give out these awards for service. And without knowing more than maybe 4 people in that huge auditorium, I feel such a sense of community from Sunrise.
Yeah.
It's like, and people really celebrate each other for what they're doing.
For sure.
People in Greeley. Yeah.
Bravo to them. So are you going to marry Dr. Haberman? Am I not supposed to say that on the podcast? You're going to edit this out?
No, live on there. We will see. We will see.
Okay.
To be continued.
All right. Well, I'm just saying she's very lovely.
Okay.
For whatever that's worth.
Right. I appreciate it, and I agree. So, let's see.
I know, now I've totally got you off track, and you're going to have to look at your notes to see what question's next. But
that's right, yeah. Holly is waiting there in severe anticipation. She's wondering what I'm about to say. So, you had mentioned at the beginning that you all at the IRC here offer education courses. Mm-hmm. So, it's language and it's citizenship. Mm-hmm. And I saw on the website that your schedule mentioned a Spanish GED.
Yeah, so we actually partner with School District 6 through their Family Center. And so we do all the levels of English language instruction and high school equivalency preparation and citizenship preparation here on campus, but we also offer all of those classes at the Family Center for School District 6. And they had a high demand of parents in the school district who really want to attain their GED, and they happen to be native Spanish speakers. And so we were able, through the school district, to offer GED preparation classes in Spanish. So that just started last semester, and we did one class as a pilot last semester, and it's picked up, and enrollment's been so great that now we have 3 different Spanish GED classes.
Very nice. So they can take the GED test in Spanish.
That's correct.
Oh, very nice.
So it will say, once they get their certificate, it specifies that they took it in Spanish. Mm-hmm. But, there's only a small group of employers that even matters to. I mean, in most instances, it's a non-factor. If they attain their GED, they have that credential, they're eligible for the job.
Right. That's neat. And I noticed that there are multiple levels of both language and citizenship classes.
Yeah.
That people, I guess they go through the tiers? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, we can say that probably we could compare all the 3rd graders in all of District 6, and there would be definitely variations. And, you'd have someone a little bit lower end and someone a little bit higher end for sure. And elementary and middle school and high school teachers all have to differentiate in their class because there's different levels. But we see that gap broaden significantly with adult learners because we get students who never became literate in their own language. They never had a chance to attend school, so they can speak their native language, obviously, but they can't read or write it. So now they're learning how to learn while they're learning this really complicated language, and they're learning the whole concept of reading and writing, which they didn't even get to learn in their native language. So we have students all the way from there up to, we have students who have advanced degrees in their home country and are quite skilled and high level, and they come here and really all they need is practice on the language itself before they can hopefully transition back into their field of study. So those are kind of the high and low ends of the gap. So we want to offer, and we do offer, as much leveled instruction as is possible. So we do standardized assessments that kind of help us figure out where students might fit and how we can make sure we're delivering instruction that's encouraging and challenging for them to move on, but that's, not overwhelming. Like, we don't want to take on writing an essay if we don't know what nouns and verbs are just yet,
Right. Yeah. Tiered support. And
yeah.
These classes are free or?
So mostly free. We have all of our classes that are specifically for our refugee students are funded through a federal grant that comes from Office of Refugee and Resettlement, and it goes through the Colorado Refugee Service Provider office here in Colorado. And so those classes are absolutely free to students. All of the classes that we do at the Family Center at District 6 or in any of the library locations or any of the actual schools like Heath or Centennial Jefferson, all of those classes are free. The only classes that there's a fee for are, we have 2 sets of classes that it's a $70 a semester for tuition, and that includes their text and workbook and any online access that goes with those materials. So it's $70 their very first semester, and then it's $55 every subsequent semester. So
okay.
We do scholarships and sliding scale, and we've never, I shouldn't say never. In the 6 years I've been the director, I know for sure no one has ever not been able to attend class based on inability to pay. So we make it happen and we make it work, but we've also found, and the research supports this, that when there's even just a little bit of buy-in, it really helps, increase retention, and which is also why I pay to go to the gym, even though I could just walk around the block, because once I've invested financially, now there's some sense of ownership and investment, and I won't sleep in as often. So it's kind of that same principle of even just that minimal charge kind of helps create buy-in and ownership of the educational process.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat of a human idea that if I pay, in essence, I earned it, I paid for this,
right,
that the quality could be perceived as higher.
Yeah, for sure.
Just like you mentioned for the gym.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's very neat. You all have an event coming up, Spotlight Burma.
Yes, I didn't know when this podcast would go out, so I wasn't sure if
it drops way before the 29th.
Okay.
But time will tell. If
Perfect.
Not, you all have, is it annual or semi-annual Spotlight events?
So Spotlight events, like a walk in their shoes, are once a year, and then we also have an event called Journey of Hope that's once a year. So that would be in the spring, although I don't know the date our advocacy director will probably kick me in the shin
That's
for
okay.
not knowing the date and
We can
being
direct
able
people
to
to the
promote.
website at
That's
the
right.
end
Please
here.
go to the website.
We will plug at the end.
That's perfect. So A Walk in Their Shoes, it's coming up on the 29th of this month, September, and it is a simulation activity. So historically, we've done this event, and it's been a simulation activity that kind of puts you through just a 2.5 hour kind of obviously very abbreviated journey of what a refugee goes through from the time they leave their country to the time they're actually here and resettled. It can be, it's very intense. And so we discourage parents from bringing elementary age children because it does simulate versions of trauma. Like you'll find yourself waiting in line maybe for a long time, or you'll start, for example, with your family, your quote unquote family, your group that you're going to go through with. And then at some point you may be taken away from them and put in a different sort of holding pattern. And, so it's meant to create some of the anxiety and discomfort that a number of our refugees experience in exponentially deeper ways and for a much longer amount of time, obviously. So I feel like now that I explained it, like no one is going to be thinking, yeah, I'll go sign up for that trauma-inducing event. But it's called A Walk in Their Shoes because it really is a way to sort of take a walk in their shoes, even just for a couple of hours, to see kind of how arduous and labor intensive and traumatic that process really can be. And so this event, more so than I think anything else we do, really breeds empathy and is a catalyst for conversations about what does resettlement look like? Are there ways we can do better? Are there ways we can be involved in making, once they are resettled, making things as seamless and efficient and easy as possible because they've already endured this really sort of long, tense journey, Yeah.
Yeah, if they're moving from Burma, it's not like they stepped on a teleporter, popped up here, and then you can form your opinion about them.
Exactly.
Some people fight and scratch and go through
and lose everything.
Scary situations to be here.
Absolutely. So this year we're spotlighting Burma. It's our first year to spotlight a particular area or group of people or anything. And the narrative experience this year is actually built from like actual experiences that some of our refugees have had. So it won't be any one person's story. It'll kind of be a story that's built from a number of stories, but everything that will happen in the simulation are actually things that happen. I mean, obviously it's a simulation. No one's going to lose legs or anything of the sort, of course. It's not dangerous in any way. It's just mentally taxing. But the things that we'll describe and talk about are real things that happen to real people living right here in Weld County.
Yeah. So if people are interested in this, it is on a Saturday.
Yeah,
right?
It is on a Saturday, the 29th, and it's at Centennial Village. And it's best to purchase tickets in advance, which you can do on the website or on our Facebook page. And then if anybody has questions about like, hey, I've got a 13-year-old, should they come to, or hey, what is this going to be like? I don't want it to trigger me in any way. Like any questions or concerns, they can reach out directly to us. And there's an email where they can send any questions or concerns also on our website. And we'll be happy to kind of discuss the event further.
There's a subset mission that you all had on the website that I don't want to end the podcast without mentioning. And that was women's empowerment for entrepreneurship and employment and jobs, and getting women here at the IRC to interact with the partners that you all have in Weld County. Do you care to?
Yeah, I'd love to say something about it.
That?
Of course. I'm a feminist. Of course I want to talk about it.
You have the floor.
So this is a very new program. We've noticed that a number of our students are almost half and half, men and women. But we noticed that a number of our female students were not exploring any kind of career pathway or continuing education. And it seemed like they would just come and they wanted to learn the language, but then to what end and for what purpose, you know? And so we wanted to sort of delicately have that conversation of, hey, are you not exploring a career, or are you not continuing your education because really that's not something that's desirable for you? Or are there things in your culture that say that's not okay or not allowed to do? What's stopping you essentially from really like pursuing your dreams? Again, cheesy as that sounds. And we found that, there's so many women that sometimes it's cultural, like there's the expectation in their home culture that they will stay home and take care of the house and the kiddos, and that's what they'll do all the time, and they don't work outside the home. And for some women, that's perfectly fine, and that's great, and that's what they want to do, and we want to support them 100% in that endeavor. But there were a number of women that they wanted to pursue things, and they have these skills and these passions and talents and hobbies, but they just weren't sure how to go about that. Those weren't doors that had ever been open to them, and those weren't options they experienced in their own country. And so the Women's Empowerment Program is really seeking to help women identify areas of interest and kind of build career pathways. And maybe it is like going into a particular career, or maybe it's going into Ames or to UNC or a certificate program or anything with continuing education, or maybe it is opening up their own daycare center. So what would it look like for us to start sort of building bridges for women to feel like they can be entrepreneurs, they can be businesswomen, they can, if they love science and medicine, then they can pursue that here in this country. And how can we make that happen? And so, to be completely honest, I don't know what this is going to look like a year from now. And I don't really know how to measure the success as far as like, on the one hand, I can see at the end of this school year, us having, 5 women who are like aggressively pursuing career pathways and building a better life for themselves. And then I think it's also completely realistic that a year from now, we've just turned a corner in the conversation, but we're still not quite there on the actual entrepreneurship piece. And so there's a lot to overcome, and we're in the very, very beginning stages of that, but I'm really excited. And Rosaline, one of our navigators, is overseeing that program, and she is just such a capable, dynamic, wonderful woman who's been through the resettlement process, the immigration process herself, and speaks multiple languages, so she can empathize with our clients in a number of ways. She's a great example. Like, she went to college, she's building a career, and so I know she's going to do a fantastic job with that program. So the ways that the community can be involved in that are that we want to get to the place where if one of our women says, I'm really interested in finance, that we have contacts at banks. And I know First Bank in particular has been a great partner to us, but I'm sure there's other banks open to it, where a female banker would say, maybe it's a teller or maybe it's a mortgage officer. They would say, hey, I would be willing to let your client shadow me for a day and talk about what I do and what education steps I had to take to get here and what I like most about my job and what I like least about my job. So we want to get to that kind of like, it's not really an apprenticeship because it'd just be like for a day, but to have that opportunity for women to get to see what it's like being out in the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe Dr. Holly will let somebody shadow her for a day.
Yeah, that's neat. So you're looking not just for employment opportunities, but educational experiences where they're immersed in jobs. And I think we said it already in this podcast, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And getting women out there and experiencing, okay, I think I want to be this. Let's see what that looks like. Absolutely. That is awesome. Yeah. You mentioned navigators multiple times. Yes. People were like, are they out there with compasses? Yes, exactly. Well, almost. Metaphorical compasses, if you will. So our navigators are a team that
most of them also serve as interpreters, but they do, as the name implies, they help people find their way. And so we know that IRC, we can't be all the things to all the people, but we want to have partnerships and relationships and be connected to other community organizations and to the county and to the city, and the district, of course, so that when someone comes in and they say, hey, I can't read my mail, or they come in and they say, hey, I have this medical problem, where do I go? What do I do? That doesn't happen during classroom time when we're practicing learning English, that they can go meet with a navigator who speaks their language, who can say, oh, this is junk mail and this is how we know it's junk mail and you can throw it away. Or, hey, this is a summons and you need to be at this place at this time and let me show you on the bus route how you can get there, kind of thing. So they're I don't think any of them have a typical day. I think like every day looks different for our navigators because it's really based. There's projects they're working on that are consistent, but it's really very client centric insofar as how do we help people find their way and how do we get them connected to the agency that can, provide this service, for example.
Right. So it's really a magician's work.
Yes,
doing whatever needs to be done to help people integrate in the community.
Absolutely. Which is why we rely so heavily. Like, it's so important that we have these partnerships with people like Sunrise, because then it's easy for our navigators to say, hey, if you need, a primary care physician, I'm going to walk you over to Sunrise. It's just right over here and let's get you set up, So having those connections in the community make it, I always hate when people say a warm handoff. It sounds just hokey to me. But for lack of a better phrase, like having those partnerships in place really does help us give that warm handoff of connecting the client to the service provider.
Right. Yeah. You had mentioned before that you were in education. Mm-hmm. So you can comment on that. But how did you bridge from there to ending up being here?
Oh, yeah.
At the IRC?
Nobody that works in any adult education facility has ever said like, oh, I always wanted to go into adult ed my whole life, because no one really knows that's a thing. Like, no one really knows it's a field of study. So I actually thought, I decided when I was in first grade that I wanted to be a teacher, and I would line my stuffed animals up. And then I would teach them my spelling words, because my mom says she remembers vividly, like, standing at the door watching me, and I was like, Teddy, listen up, we got a spelling test tomorrow.
Teddy was a troublesome one.
Teddy didn't want to pay attention to spelling words, and
late homework all the
clearly
time.
He was my favorite. So I finished high school. I went to college, and I got my degree in social science education. So I became a history and government teacher and a basketball coach for a high school, and I thought I would do that for forever because I loved it, loved my kids, loved my job. And then at some point decided, these kids they're not really good writers. What's happening? And I'd always loved English, so I thought, I'm going to get my master's in English, because if you're going to stay in education, continuing your education is a way to bump up on the salary schedule. So I thought, I want to get my master's in English so that I can teach history and English. These are passions of mine. And so I went back to grad school. While I was in grad school, the plan was just get your master's in English Lit and then go back to teaching high school. But while I was in grad school, I was fortunate enough to get a graduate assistantship that part of that, my responsibilities therein were to teach some composition classes to predominantly freshmen. And so doing that, I thought, oh, well, I do love my high school kids, but teaching college is pretty fun because no parent-teacher conferences. If they don't show up for class, that's on them, and I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. So maybe I want to explore what it would be like to teach at the collegiate level. Also, while I was in college, I got a job teaching a night class, an ESL night class to level 4 learners. And I loved it, but I didn't think there was any way to make a career out of that. So I just kind of had in the back of my head, if I can ever figure out how to pay my bills while I work with English language learners, I'll do it. But I didn't really think that was a possibility. So I taught, finished grad school, and then I taught at the college level in Arkansas for a while. And then I moved back here in the middle of a school year. And so I didn't think there'd be any jobs at the school district or at the college because it was February and no one's hiring a teacher in February. But Right to Read at the time needed an ESL teacher. So I thought I'll just do this for a season because I loved it until I go back into full-time education. And then, of course, fell in love with it all over again and was like, I've got to figure out a way to make this my career. This has to be what I do. So fortunately for me, some classes opened up and I got enough classes to make that my full-time gig. And I was about a year into that, and my predecessor, the executive director, was on her way to a different job doing community work. And so I had all these ideas. Here's the truth. This is the honest to God truth. I had all these ideas of things I wanted to do to like make things better and really like, oh, this is a gap and we could really fill that gap by doing these things. And what if we expanded in all these ways? And so I became interim director, and the plan was put all my ideas into action while I was the interim director. And then if the board hires someone else, I've already got everything I wanted kind of right there, implemented, and then I can just go back to teaching. But then while I was interim, I sort of realized I really love big picture stuff. I like being a visionary, and I like encouraging teachers. And as much as I love working with students, I love working with teachers too and helping them become better teachers. So then I applied for real for the position, and the board chose me. And so 6 years later, I'm still doing administrative work.
And
who knew?
Here you are.
Yeah, I do. I really miss the classroom though. Like, I think that's where I'll end up. I think I'll finish my career back with some high school kids.
Full circle. Full circle.
But for now, I am so fortunate to work with the student body and the staff that I have. Like, they're the best. It really is. Like, obviously I'm biased and love this organization and I love the mission and vision, or I wouldn't be here. But having such amazing people I get to work alongside and on behalf of, that's been the most fulfilling work of my life.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of anyone who does or doesn't know about the IRC, thank you for the work that you all are doing here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
It's wonderful. Yeah. So, for our listeners here, as we wrap up, let's say that I listen to this and I want to attend Refugee 101 or Immigrants 101.
Uh-huh.
Do I sign up on the website?
Actually, those are offered kind of sporadically on a needs basis at a number of different places. So if you're interested, the best thing to do is to email our advocacy director, and his email is on the website, and he can tell you, hey, the next one is at such and such location at such and such time. And if there's not one coming up, but there's enough interest, then certainly we'll create a new class. And it's just a 2-hour, it can be 3-hour, but a 2-hour workshop, essentially. It's pretty bird's eye view of what's going on. But yeah, feel free to reach out, and certainly we want to make sure we plug anybody that wants more information into the right place. Yeah, and if they feel emboldened to volunteer, website, best place? Yes, there's a volunteer application that's online, along with volunteer descriptions of like, here's a number of different places you can volunteer. And even if if you have a particular skill set, but you don't see it listed on there, and you still want to be involved, like, still come volunteer with us. Like, we're a nonprofit, so using the skill sets of those people who care about our cause, like, that's how we leverage resources and save cost and get better and better and better as an organization. So we'd be glad to have anybody. Yeah. And if they want to reach out to Lisa Taylor directly, email best? Yeah, email's the best. Yeah, I'm in and out of meetings. I spend an inordinate amount of time in meetings. So thank email. You for your time today. Yes. No problem. My pleasure. But email's the most rapid response. You'll hear from me quickest via email, because I can do that, even late at night or early in the morning. So again, feel free to reach out. I love having conversations about what we're doing. And if any listeners have ideas on how we can do it better, or they see a need in the community that we are currently not addressing that needs to be addressed, like, I'm wide open to those conversations. So bring it. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Time. And if anyone would like other resources, reach out to Lisa or the IRC here in Greeley, and we'll get you connected. Great. Thank you. I want to say a very special thanks to Russell Isaac Long, the man responsible for writing and mixing all the music tracks used here at the NoCo.
If you'd like to access any content in addition to these episodes, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The More You NoCo. If you have ideas for people you'd like to hear on the show, hit us up at the email themoreyouKnowco@gmail.com. Until next time, peace!